any workplace, more and more with microcomputers, work is occurring at home. The need for a central office for, say, an insurance company might not be as needed as if we trust the employee to do some of that work at home if they have their terminal there. Are there any experiments planned or presently going where the region is going to indeed place a terminal in someone's home and say, stay home for 2 days out of 5, so that you get your work done there, and simply tell us what you're doing through the computer reporting system, and that, because it might have a tremendous savings to just finding space for you in a new building or whatever.
I just respond quickly to that. I think that's an excellent idea. It's not entirely new. Telecommuting is something that we want to look at, and in fact, we had a person into our senior management meeting the other day talking about space standards, and one of the things that we have to take into account is how many people actually have to work out of the office, and we're going to be having a close look at that over the next few months to determine whether or not there are certain positions within the region where that can happen, and where it can happen, it's in our definite financial interest to do that, because we don't have to accommodate them, and we can save funding in that regard. So that's something that I think is a good idea, and over the next 6 months or so, we've targeted ourselves till next fall. We'll look at that and see what opportunities there are.
Thank you.
Not a new story, but it's a very comprehensive background of exactly what we're talking about. And it was in last week's Sports Magazine. It was actually on the weekend with a friend of mine. Ironically, right on the button with what you're talking about. And I will make this available to council and the rest of the...
If indeed the investment, the return on the investment is 8.57 at your department, you have that talent this year. If you compared that to what the city of Brampton's doing, or Mississauga, or whoever else invests money, and you came out as consistently better, maybe this is a function that you could offer to the area municipalities, and again in the spirit of looking for what are your strengths, bragging a little bit about them, and then seeing if some of the area municipalities would take you up on your offer to invest the money on our behalf, or maybe vice versa. Maybe Brampton's doing it better than the region, and we could invest your money. But I think those new kinds of thoughts have to be thought and shared with each other if we really are going to impress our public. The last question, I noticed in one of the presentations that in order to make a tradition you've fallen into, and the city has too, is to recover your many costs internally. So you bill everybody internally for your costs, and I guess that way is a traditional thing that's grown up. And I'm wondering, is that a cost-effective way of doing it? It does put the responsibility on the person, quotes, buying the service, not to ask for too much, because they have to pay the bill. But all the paperwork that is involved in keeping track and transferring the costs, and you must have a whole lot of people on staff just running around internal paper. In the city of Brampton,
has an answer for you.
in the city of Brampton, we do that, and it always puzzles me. Why do we charge somebody for using a vehicle out of the vehicle department? Wouldn't it be far better if we just gave it a wash and saved all that paperwork?
Madam Chair, there is some administrative overhead involved in allocating these costs, but we feel, excuse me, the benefits far outweigh the costs. At the region in particular, since there are so many programs that are cost shared by the province, it's very important to identify the costs that are subsidizable and attribute them in the appropriate program area in order to obtain subsidy. Also on the sewer and water rate, many of the services provided to the sewer and water programs are provided by tax-supported programs. It's important to get those costs off the tax bill and onto the sewer and water bill in that way. We don't internally charge 100% of all services. If a service is provided by one tax-supported program to another tax-supported program, in the main, we don't charge that out. There could be benefits to full cost allocation, and we're looking at that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, staff, for your responses. I look forward to...
Thank you. Mr. Garrett, would you like to introduce the next? I think we're out of questions, so we may move on to the next department. You're not on here.
Talked to the chairperson twice about it. I pushed this one twice.
Well, your light's not on and you've not been queued. Second takes it off. You want on? Just for a moment? Okay, let me find you. There you go. You're on. You got 30 seconds.
Well, if I have 30 seconds.
We're going on to the next. Administration, can you ask the questions in that section,
No,
or is it
I
up
don't have
to do
questions of
this?
administration, I have questions of finance, but if I
There
have
you go.
30 seconds, it's a waste of
I was
time.
teasing you. Go ahead. We do not want to be here past 5 o'clock, though, Mr. Whitehead, please.
Madam Chairman, in response to a couple of questions that the mayor raised on utility costs, I just wanted to state that one of the advantages to putting an increase on the utility charge rather than subsidizing it through tax-supported means is that the user can regulate the amount of, for instance, water they use, and in that sense control themselves the amount of money they'll pay. If it's put on the tax bill, there is no way that the taxpayer can avoid paying the taxes short of selling their property. So that brings me to a question. Is any part of the utility program supported through tax dollars?
Yeah, but I've never been on again.
Madam Chair, I think the short answer is no. To our knowledge, there aren't any major costs that are not fully recovered through the utility bill.
I think it might be worth the exercise, Madam Chairman, to determine what, if any, costs there are, so that we can at least consider moving those costs, should they exist, to the utility tax bill, away from the property taxes, for the reasons I just stated. I think there is also quite a difference between user fees in any capacity of service and tax support through the property taxes. So the next question I have are there any user-related costs of the region that are not totally covered by the user? For instance, I'm thinking of the Land Division Committee.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is an issue that was recently debated at Regional Council, and I believe in that case the present rate does not fully recover the cost.
Again, Madam Chairman, I think it would be a useful exercise if the Region Appeal was able to determine where the shortfalls lie in user fees related to the costs, how much they are, and whether or not it's possible to shift most, if not all, of those additional costs towards the user fee and away from the property tax bills. I'm saying this because, as Chairman Cole brightly pointed out when I was on the phone for a few moments, the province is engaging in serious downloading to us as a municipality, and we have to try to manage property taxes. And there are different ways we can manage it. One of the ways is just simply to cancel services, or to tell the province that we're not prepared to pay their shot. And we may do some of that, and I hope we will. But another way is to cleanse the tax bill so that we're not using property taxes to support in any way utility costs or other types of user fees? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
No other speakers, we'll move on to Mr. Garrett. Unless, did you want to say something, Mr.?
Well, there are, if I may, Madam Chairman, there are some areas I'm sure that we still have concern about, as I received a letter just yesterday, and for example, septic tank application forms. I'm not sure whether the province is now looking at an administration cost for their side of it or not, but that's sort of another area that could be looked at. So there certainly are some areas that could be reviewed over the next few months in that area that I'm aware of.
Just to add, Madam Chairman, to that, we are going to look at the fees in the planning department for subdivision approvals, because that's one area, one of the largest areas that we've had some discussion about, and I think you're aware of it, is the whole area of waste management, but it's fraught with some difficulty in terms of applying user fees to that. Garbage by the bag has a disposal, a gutter problem, so to speak.
Mr. Garrett, just a question on that issue then, if you're talking recovering fees, what happens with people who are holding back taxes, or are we looking into, I think one of the other cities is prosecuting all past tax people who are holding back on taxes?
We're in the fortunate position of the region of not having that problem, because we levy the area municipalities who have the responsibility for tax collection. So whatever we determine, you determine at the region, as the levy, it's levied on the 3 area municipalities, and they have the responsibility for collecting the taxes.
And if someone refuses just to pay their regional taxes and sends that in a letter, the city is not putting that back on the region?
No, the city has a responsibility to pay the levy.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Madam Chairman, that was the only question I was going
Green.
to ask in this
Green.
section. Pardon?
Push the green button.
That was the only question I was going to ask in this section, so that the viewers are watching, so don't lose the thread. If I could ask it now.
Go. If Mr. Garrett might be able to help you in this.
Well, he was the one I was going to ask the question. As you just related, it's the local area municipalities are the tax collector for the region themselves and the Board of Education. The region is approximately 13% of the tax bill, depends on the municipality. Board of Education is approximately 65%, and the local area municipality is approximately 22%. These are the Kelvin figures that I'm quoting. And as you rightly stated, the municipality has to remit to the region and the Board of Education the levy, whether they're capable of collecting it or not. 2 questions. One is, if the region is getting 13% of the revenue derived from property taxes, how much of the cost of billing and collecting those taxes by the local area municipality is supported by the region?
I'd have to defer to Louise for this. Louise, do you have an answer to that?
Madam Chair, the way the tax system works at present, the city and town collect the taxes and remit to the region's share of that payment the following business day. There is no admin overhead charge at present for that tax collection service.
So it should be noted then that the municipalities bear 100% of the cost of collecting and remitting the taxes for themselves, the region, and the Board of Education.
If I may, Madam Chairman, one of the discussions earlier back in regards to this particular issue was whether or not the region should collect on behalf of all of the 3 area municipalities, and whether that would be more cost effective to do it. So I think, as it may be today, if region decide or the council decide that it can be more cost effectively done by one agency doing it, I guess we would put the same terms in the other way if you like. So I think that even though the points are very valid today, that's what the law is, and the tables may be reversed in the future if we can find that it may be more cost effective to do it. I don't think the standards, though, of course, would change that, or the interest rate might change on the penalty, or the way of collecting in the long term may change in the course of action. So I think you got to keep that in mind when you're you're having this as a discussion.
I think, Madam Chairman, there are two issues here. One is the righty, as Chairman Kolb is saying, someone else might eventually collect the tax. That's the one issue. The other issue is, I believe that everybody should pay their share of the cost, whoever collects it for them. That's, to me, a different issue. Particularly the boards of education. Why should they not pay 65% of the cost of collecting the tax and remitting it for them? Why should the City of Brampton, the Town of Kelvin, the City of Mississauga lay out considerable sums of money for the Board of Education to collect their levy for them? I'm not suggesting there be 3 tax bills. I've never suggested that. But surely the boards of education and the Region of Appeals should pay their share of the cost
Of collection.
of the tax bill.
Madam Chair, that makes the point you've got the public, maybe that you should follow through what Mr. White has said. Just to clarify, all of us will collect the taxes, or even when we haven't fully collected the taxes, have to pay it to both the region and the Board of Education. Those people holding back their taxes are not doing anything by benefiting, and especially themselves, because they're being charged the percent, 1.5%. Plus the fact that's delaying the situation down the line. And I think that should be made clear to the public out there, because I think there is a misunderstanding that they think by holding back their taxes, they're punishing or showing a position to the Board of Education. It's costing them, once again, and us, at both the municipal and the regional area, additional expense. And there's a better way of expressing their concerns. Thank you for that opportunity.
Mr. Garrett, we'll try again.
Madam Chair, let me first start out by saying that not only am I the CAO, but I act as the Commissioner of Administration, and so the program that we're going to describe as quickly as we can late this afternoon to you is administration. And let me first start out by introducing to you the directors that we have in administration. First is Deb Troughton, who is the Regional Clerk and the Director of Administration. We have Kent Gillespie on my left, who is the Regional Solicitor, and Paul Vivian, who has just joined us as our Director of Human Resources. So that group, I think, if I haven't forgotten anyone, forms our team. I want to just go very quickly through what the administration department as such is broken down into, and if you can just have regard for the slide, it's really 4 functions. The first, as I say, is human resources. The second, the regional solicitor, the regional clerk's department, and the executive arm. Each of the directors are going to speak to their particular area, and I won't even dwell on what those functions are about because they'll cover that. But while I'm up here, I wanted to deal very quickly with the overall department and the executive arm itself. Most of the funding comes from internal charges, and fees, which we've talked about already. Chargebacks to other areas. For instance, Kent Gillespie in legal charges fees for providing legal services to other departments such as Public Works. But there is a balance that is considered corporate that is covered off the property tax itself. The spending essentially goes primarily on salaries, but it also goes for a variety of goods and services and rents and contributions to reserves. Primarily, it's a staff-driven function with chargebacks. Now, if I can just turn to the executive arm itself, that is that element of the administration department consists of the council and chairman's operation and the operation of my office, the CAO's office. And collectively, our job is to implement council's direction, to ensure that council's direction in terms of recommendations, resolutions, and bylaws are implemented, to carry out strategic planning for the organization, to have a view to the longer-term future and make sure that our programs and policies are in accord with the long-term direction the council wants to take, to manage the corporation in terms of its performance, to ensure that it is run as effectively and as efficiently as it can. The chairman's office particularly has prime responsibility for community relations and spends a great deal of time in liaising with community groups and other members of the public at large and the public in Peel specifically. One of the major functions that I have as CAO is the allocation of financial and human resources and deploying those to the areas of highest priority, both in response to the demands of council, but also in response to efficiency opportunities when they arise. And last but not least, because as I've explained earlier, we are a highly leveraged outfit, the region of Peel, intergovernmental relations both at the area municipal level and the provincial level and even sometimes the federal level, as Paul Vezina explained this morning, in the case of immigration, is a very important part of the function of the executive wing. The funding for the executive arm is about $1,450,000, and most of it, about 80% of it, is a charge to the property taxpayer. There is some proportion that is charged back to the sewer and water operation and put on user fees, and that was an issue that was raised earlier, and Louise answered that. To the extent that a proportion of the service provided by council and the CAO's office is for the purposes of serving the sewer and water function, that is charged back to the utility rate. Our spending is, again, primarily salaries and wages for the salaries and wages related to council and my office, and the services that we pay to different departments for the goods and services that we use, whether it's supplies or whether it's rent or whether it's microcomputers. A couple of key facts that we use as benchmarks in estimating the cost of the service that's provided by the executive arm. In servicing 21 councillors, a chairman, and he has a support staff of 2. The cost is $1.29 per capita. My office has a staff of 6, including myself, and the cost per capita is about 61 cents. So those are indicators that we use to determine approximately the level of service that we're providing, and we can show change from year to year in that regard. Now, I want to next call on, who is it now? I think it's Kent Gillespie to give us a quick overview of the regional solicitor's function.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Kent Gillespie. I'm the regional solicitor, and I'd like to talk to you this afternoon about the office of the regional solicitor. This is the first year that both legal services and realty services have been combined in the office of the regional solicitor, and as such, we have 2 of the best loved professions in our division, lawyers and real estate agents. I recently heard that they're no longer using white rats for scientific experiments. They're using lawyers and real estate agents. There's 2 reasons for this. First of all, there's more of them. Secondly, the scientists don't become as attached to them as they get to the rats. Let's move on to the services and programs. We have the
Push your
lights.
buttons.
Okay, just 2. Okay. There we go. We have the 2 sections, legal services and realty services, and to give you some examples of what we do in legal services, you'll see the word litigation, and that includes appearances in both courts and tribunals. For example, if an industry dumps, say, toxic waste into the sewer, we prosecute those offenders. If say, a restaurant doesn't meet health standards, we provide legal counsel in the prosecutions in that regard. If the region perhaps doesn't get paid for a charge or a fee or on a contract, we sue, and sometimes we sue successfully even. This year, for example, we recovered about $300,000 from an insurance company that was reluctant to pay a claim. For example, construction claims, if they arise in the course of the region's business, we also act on behalf of both the region and Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation in that regard. We've had a couple of those this year. We got an award of $200,000 in one favor, and we settled another one that resulted in a savings of about $1 million. Besides courts, we have many tribunals that we represent the region in front of. If the region were to deny welfare to a claimant who isn't entitled to welfare, we represent the region at the Social Assistance Review Board. If a developer doesn't comply with the regional requirements, we would represent the region at the OMB, and that's the Ontario Municipal Board. And if land is needed for a capital works project that we cannot buy, we conduct the expropriation and settle the compensation payable to the owner. We also deal with environmental boards, Human Rights Commission, and other boards and tribunals. For example, even this year, we represented the Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation at a coroner's inquest regarding the death of a young child at one of those complexes. We also provide corporate counsel services, and that mainly involves advice on provincial and federal law, and everything from procedures at council meetings to environmental matters, freedom of information, finance, purchasing. And as everyone knows, there are more and more changes to law coming along every day, and we have to keep up with those. We draft contracts and agreements, bylaws, letters, opinions, and provide a myriad of other services to the corporation. In the real estate and construction part of the service, in legal services, we basically have two areas. We complete all real estate transactions on behalf of the region for property bought and sold. And we also provide advice and draft contracts and documents for construction projects for roads, water and sewer projects, buildings, and we also assist the Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation on their projects for nonprofit housing. And we provide a lot of services in connection with advice on the tender process and the region's rights and obligations under various contracts. On the realty services side, the main service provided there is the acquisition of land for capital works projects. The region has quite an aggressive program in that regard, and we acquire all those little parcels of land that are required for road widenings, sewer and water projects, and we have about 500 parcels to acquire in the next couple of years. And about 90% of the realty services section's time is spent in that regard. We also get involved with leasing, and we negotiate and renew leases for office space and facilities required for regional programs. For example, social service, welfare offices, health department, district offices, police facilities when they require those properties, and the headquarters buildings and public works. The last function in realty services is land inventory management, and that involves keeping records of all the land owned by the region and managing property which is not being occupied currently by operating departments, and managing sale or disposal of surplus land. The key facts that are relevant to our division deal with the distribution of our services among various clients. Our client is really the regional corporation, and it takes a number of forms. We have the council itself and the various departments. We have boards and agencies such as Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation, the police. The bulk of our services provided to the Public Works Department in relation to capital works projects as one item. A large amount of service deals with waste management. For example, the Britannia landfill extension or lift. We deal with development applications and litigation arising out of that, and provide advice on and prosecutions in respect to the sewer use bylaw. The next major client that we have is what we call administration and finance. It involves the clerk's office, council, on matters relating to regional council, on legislative matters. The human resources division provides services regarding employment and labor law. The treasury and finance function involving services in respect of utility accounts, purchasing, finance, and development charges. You'll note that under planning and housing, that includes Peel Nonprofit, and we have a fairly special relationship with Peel Nonprofit in as much as we do a lot of work for them on their development side. They also manage regional headquarters properties, and we are involved with them in as much as we act on the acquisition and disposal of real property. Now, you'll note that that the 18 employees in this division, of the 18, 5 are on contract, and that's mainly because there is a large capital program component, and currently there's a great volume of work in that area. If the program needs were reduced, we could then reduce the numbers of contract staff and reduce the overall staffing. The service levels have been divided between legal services and realty services because there are two indicators there. There are 4 lawyers in legal services, including myself, and we've set a billable hour target of 5,200 hours, and that's 1,300 hours for each lawyer per year. And it's usually exceeded, and this represents less than 85% of the total number of hours in the office, as it were, or at work. And the question comes up, what's the billable hour? Well, and private law firms use the billable hours to measure and charge for services. Time spent on a particular task or file or doing work directly related to the task is what's involved in a billable hour. It doesn't include things like office management, continuing legal education, or staff meetings and those sorts of things. We try and operate in legal services like a private law firm. We set annual targets for billable hours to ensure value to the corporation. We set rates for services based on a budget cost, and it's obviously less than the private sector because we don't include a profit on that. But we do include the overhead for all our costs, so all our costs are included in the figure. The target reflects reasonable billable hours for employees, and we often hear of unreasonably high targets set in the private practice. And looking at some lawyers' bills, you'd think that they had no time to sleep or eat unless they work in their sleep. I'm reminded of the story of a lawyer finding themselves at the pearly gate, and they complained to St. Peter they shouldn't be there. And he said, I'm in perfect health and I'm far too young, I'm only 42. And St. Peter answered, that's strange, according to your billable hours, you're 102 years old. So we want to avoid the unreasonable situation that can occur. Realty services is driven by capital works programs, and 90% of those services are for acquisitions of properties for capital projects. We have hundreds of parcels to buy or expropriate, and that 1992 rate or target that you see up there is really double the 1991 rate, and we will be hopefully trying to triple that rate in 1993. On funding, we can see the pie chart. It reflects really the charges to the clients to whom we provide services. Now, in that big part called internal, that includes, well, at least half of that is our charges to programs for services which receive provincial subsidies or are user pay services. For example, water rates, sewer rates, etc. The other half is charges to capital reserves in respect of capital works programs. There are no charges to property tax supported programs other than, well, let's say the internal charge component does not include any charges to property tax supported programs. And you'll see that in the other sector, property tax, and that represents services to that sector of the corporation that is supported by taxes. The reason that we charge provincially subsidized programs and user pay programs is that if we did not, the regional taxpayer would be subsidizing, in essence, the provincial government or the user of the service, which is something that we do not want to do. The other part of the funding from capital projects is really a direct cost of the project. If the service was not provided by us, it would be provided by some other, either outside lawyer or consultant at probably higher rates. And lastly, we have spending. You'll see that the figures there, 71%, 28%. It's actually more like 80%, 20% now, or should have been. What we did is we converted some consulting services that were under goods and services into contract employee services, and that would shift that slightly. And that is the summary of the offices of the regional solicitor. I'd like you to leave you with this thought, though, that there's no such thing as free legal advice. It's usually worth exactly what you pay for it. Thank you.
It is a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon and to speak to the Human Resource Department of the Peak Region of Peel. We provide several services to our business units. We provide these services in partnership with our business units. We provide a service of employee development, which is training, productivity improvement. We do this through education. We do this based on a needs analysis. We do this also both with internal and external team leaders. We are responsible for the agreement renewal of our collective agreements. We have 7 collective agreements at the Region of Peel, all of which are due in 1993. We are responsible for the grievance and arbitration programs at the Region of Peel. The province of Ontario in Canada is one of the countries where the right to strike during the collective agreement is not in the jurisdiction. We have to provide consistent arguments and grievance settlement. We have about 10% of our grievances which go to arbitration. In the area of occupational health and safety, we really break down into 3 parts. One is workplace safety, make sure that all our workplaces are safe to work in. One is control of those accidents which do occur to ensure that the claims are actually justified. And the other area is to see to a prompt return to productive employment for those employees who are injured in the workplace. In the area of recruitment, we handle a full range of recruitment, everywhere from attraction to the job, to testing, to actually doing the hiring of the folks. Salary and administration benefits, administration, we ensure that all our pay systems are equitable, that people are paid commensurate with the responsibilities of the jobs that they perform. With respect to employment and pay equity, employment equity has been an active program at the region for several years. It has to be adjusted in 1993 because of the legislation that will come on board. We expect the legislation to be enacted mid-1993, and we'll have 18 months to put forward a program. With respect to pay equity, the region has several programs which are done, all of which, with the exception of one, is in effect. We have one bargaining unit who have us at the tribunal right now, and we would expect that that would be resolved sometime during 1993. With respect to the salaried staff, as you know, once a pay equity plan is posted, people have the opportunity or the right to, in fact, challenge that plan, and we have a group of the salaried people who have chosen to challenge the plan. We expect settlement of that in 1993. In the area of the number of full-time employees, there's exactly 2,065 full-time employees at the Region of Peel. 22.9% are in public works, 6.2% in housing, 8.6% in finance, 37.7% in social services, 1.8% in planning, 18.4% in health, and 4.4% in administration. Our expenses in a year are $2,410,922, of which 73.5% is charged back to the business units, 26.5% are not charged back. Those expenditures are spread out into goods and services, most of which are legal services required, salary and wages 39%, and reserves of 41.5%, which is workmen's compensation reserve. The Region of Peel has chosen to be self-insured in the area of workmen's compensation. Some key facts driving the human resource function: there are 2,400 employees altogether. 1,400 are non-unionized, and 1,000 approximately are unionized. There are 365 employees that are either part-time or on a contract basis. As I mentioned before, there are 7 bargaining units. We receive and administer and respond to 6,000 job applications a year. We hire about 210 people a year. Most of that hiring is done for social services. There are 245 compensable accidents throughout the region during the year, and we had 22 retirements last year. 66.6% of our staff are female, 2/3. 15% are of visible minority. The female salaries versus the male salaries are 89%. And there are 19 employees in the human resource area. Debbie, I think you... With respect to the allocation of human resource services, 17% of our budget is attributable to public works, 5.7% to housing, 5.8% to finance, 40% to social services, 0.2% to planning, 10.3% to health, 18.2% to police, and that is just the compensation reserves for their workmen's compensation fund, and 2.3% for administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Debbie Troughton, the director of the Clerks Division. The services that are provided by our division, coming up on the screen now, are 4 main services: communication services, corporate secretariat and records management, heritage, and insurance and risk management. In the communications area, we provide support to the various departments in producing some of the major communications with our target audiences. We're largely in the business of education and communication as a region, and we do have a vital role to play in supporting that function across the departments. In addition, we do some issues management, where we're tracking issues to try and be in a state of preparedness with our target audiences. We do some media relations, those being our prime vehicle through which we can communicate with the residents and our other target audiences. And we also do a small community relations program in that area. Corporate Secretariat and Records Management provides a myriad of services to the organization. Primarily it serves committee and council in handling all the actions that come out of the variety of committee meetings and council meetings. We also provide the Corporate Secretariat function to Peel Nonprofit Housing Board, manage the region's policy and procedure manual, offer a corporate micro-processing service, which is a profit center for us, provide some legislative services, and for example, the drafting of bylaws, process the plans of subdivision and condominium on behalf of the organization, which involves coordinating the work of several departments, and process all of the agreements that the region enters into. The solicitor and I are the primary signing authorities, and all of the agreements that we enter into, which exceed around 500 a year, are processed through this division. In addition, we provide an inactive records management function to the corporation. We must keep records in accordance with our records retention bylaw, the terms of which keeping the records are documented in a number of acts. And we also provide the Freedom of Information service to the organization and to the public. In Heritage, many of you are familiar with our Heritage Complex, where we operate a museum, the region's art gallery, an archival reading room, which is the repository for the records of the area municipalities, the school boards, and the Children's Aid Society in the region. And we also deliver the insurance and risk management program for the police, Peel Nonprofit, and the regional corporation. In terms of our funding, 53.7% is property tax based. Once again, as you've heard from the Finance Department and both Paul and Kent, we exist to serve other departments, and hence we charge for not all of our services, but to the tune of 40% of our services, charged back across the department, some of which are property tax supported, subsidy supported, and against capital, and also the utility and rate programs. In addition, we recover some money externally from users, for example, of our subscription service for the committee and council agendas, and for some sale of photographs at the archives facility, as well as for freedom of information and compliance letters, lawyers' letters. In addition, we receive a small amount of money, around $30,000 from the provincial government, as a subsidy for offsetting some of the operating costs at the museum. In terms of our total spending, 47.3% goes to salary and wages, 42.1% to goods and services, including rent, microcharges, and other internal services, and 10.6% to reserves. We operate two reserves, the Insurance Rate Stabilization Reserve and the Heritage Building Reserve. As I mentioned earlier, we do exist to serve other departments and the public directly. As you can see in this slide, I've broken down the hours of service provided to some of our key clients. 37% of our time is spent in direct service to the public with the operation of the museum and with the communication function that we do play. The next largest audience falls into that category that Roy Wiseman mentioned earlier, services that we provide that we just can't logically charge against a particular department, so we've lumped them into what we call corporate. Council provide 8.5% of our time directly to serve council and the vital function that it plays, making sure that the actions that you take at every meeting are followed up on and communicated to the right people. And then you can see the breakdown of some of our key departments. We do service the police and Peel Nonprofit Housing as well. Lastly, in terms of our service level, we are in the business of selling time and talent. And in our communications area, we provide over 10,000 hours of service a year in creative service to our various departments and key clients. You may be surprised to learn that you meet 105 or more times a year. On average, 108 action items come out of each of your meetings, which translates into direct activity or work in our division when we proceed to take action as you have specified. As I mentioned earlier, we do manage an inactive records center. We've got 12,000 cubic feet of records, and that amount is growing, as you heard this morning, with the activity in the social service area. We are taking on more and more records into that inactive records center. So it's imperative that we destroy on time and in accordance with our retention bylaws, because every cubic foot of space costs the organization and the taxpayers money. This year we will have received and processed 75 formal requests under the MFIFA, the Freedom of Information legislation. In addition to that, while this chart doesn't show it, we have processed over 200 informal requests as well. Paul Vivian, our Director of Human Resources, mentioned the new hires, the level of 210, and mentioned that largely they are in social services. We must train those people on an ongoing basis as to how to interpret and administer and treat personal information. Has a direct relationship on the programs that we deliver. In our insurance program, we receive on average 450 claims per year and process those. Not all of them, of course, we pay out on. Some of them we deny. And I report on that annually, as you know, to committee. In terms of our visitors at the Heritage Complex, this year we anticipate 28,000 visitors through that complex. It's a service that's used by residents in all 3 area municipalities and visitors to our region, as well as the school children. And it's a very worthwhile program, and one that we're very proud to provide to the residents of Peel. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions of our staff? Councillor Holden?
I had one earlier with regards to the legal department, and mainly you referred to 5,200 hours, I think it was, Ken, and you gave some indications of that you were booking that out at cut rates compared to the legal profession. I just had a look at that, and having a son that's in that profession as a legal clerk, I know what they bill his hours out at. If one were to take 300 as an average, $300 against that, would I be right that that would be fair? Because what I'm trying to do is show to the public the fact that there's that accounts for, based on 5,200 hours, $1,500,000, which was in essence a good showing of how efficient, by having an internal staff handling things as against having to go outside all the time for services. So that's the reason I brought that up, and whether or not my figures are right. But I think it's a good story that the public should be aware of, because I endorse what you're doing, and I see a lot of efficient aspects of relationship to this, and most recently at the town of Caledon, we have added an additional lawyer because we felt that it was a better way of doing things as well. I'd like your comments, if you wouldn't mind.
As you know, Councillor Holden, the region uses the services of outside lawyers from time to time because, of course, we wouldn't want to staff up to the level where we would provide for all specialties. But what we do is we keep careful records of what we pay for those outside services. And we, every year, we look at, on average, what we're paying. And those bills include costs for lawyers at the higher rates, which are 300 and sometimes above, and some of them include a lot of student time and junior lawyer time. And we develop an average, and the average is around the $200 an hour mark. Our cost to the corporation is about $110 an hour, so there's $90 an hour saved right there. And if you multiply that by the 5,200, you've got significant savings to the corporation on legal services. That holds true from year to year. There's about a spread of about $90 to $100 between the outside service and the inside cost.
Councillor Whitehead.
Well, Madam Chairman, anybody that's sat wearily in front of the television all day and watched this process and has heard some pretty pointed discussions deserves a little story. I think it'll take a short time I was reminded when Debbie talked about the volume of information that's in storage and the bylaw that has to be followed rigidly in order to destroy it as fast as you possibly can. It took over 100 years to store all the known written information in the ancient world in the Great Library of Alexandria, which was only about 3 times the size of this room, which burned down. And 2,500 years later, we're producing information at such a fantastic rate that we have to have rules and regulations that assure that people get rid of the information as soon as they possibly can so we don't become overwhelmed with it.
That's all?
That's it.
That's it?
Your lesson for today.
I was waiting for a longer. Mr. Garrett, would you like to just say a few words at the end here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just like to say that if that is all the questions, that we've welcomed this opportunity to discuss our service levels, and if there are any other questions or areas that councillors or the public want to delve into further, we're more than happy to hear from them and explain various program areas, whether it's administration or any other program, in more detail. It's an opportunity for us to examine ourselves more carefully and respond to some of the questions, and all of the issues that have been raised here in the 2 days that we've met are very valid ones, and we will be dealing with those over the near term rather than the long term. Thank you for the opportunity of doing this.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Bissell. Just want to say a thank you to the City of Brampton for allowing us the opportunity to use their beautiful council chambers here with their fine equipment in it to bring to the public, to our residents, sort of a cross-section of our budget with the level of services that we tried to provide, and sort of in a summary way, really, the dollars that are spent in these. Over the next 3 or 4 months, we will of course be getting into the numbers after they're brought forward by our chief administrator, and hopefully in that area that we will again notify the public and the ratepayer groups that we have on the list, or anybody that is on the list, of the dates that we will be dealing with that. And again, it'll be an open process, and hope that they'll have an opportunity to join us if they so wish.
Madam Chair, could I just add one other thing? I forgot to thank Deb Trouton and her communications staff, who put a lot of effort into putting these slides together. I said to Louise that you'll probably never want to look at another pie chart again, so we already have plans to have the next presentation in histograms.
At this time, I'd like to thank the 2 cable companies for their time today, and to indicate to anybody at home who does have any more questions that the Budget Committee is willing to listen to you at any time, and that this process is going to be an open one right through the whole budget process. My name's Lorna Bissell. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee, and I'd like to thank you for watching today, and I hope we were informative. Thank you, and good night.
Rogers Community 10 Brampton.